So this is The Girl of Ink and Stars, Chapter 9. I leant heavily against the table leg with my back to the butterfly until Pablo's exhausted face came into view. His hands were tied behind him, his clothes filthy. He was dragging his feet, squinting as he stepped into the light of the corridor. His eyes widened when he saw me, but thankfully he said nothing to Ferdinand and unchained me. We followed the guard in silence, crossing a small courtyard to the stables. 9 horses were lined up inside. I could tell they were not the sort of horses the governor was used to. In fact, I'm quite sure that one of them was a donkey. No trouble, you two. I'll be just in here. Ferdinand indicated another door. The smell of cooking wafted out. Don't worry, it's not your chicken, he said to me. She's in one of those boxes there. Had to put her in a separate one. She kept pecking the others. He pointed to a stack of wooden crates. I grimaced. Miss La would not like being squashed in like that, alone or not. We knew all of that on those, Ferdinand continued, nodding at the horses. Pablo raised an eyebrow. You taking live chickens? Ferdinand shrugged. The men like to eat fresh, and I wouldn't keep them waiting. He untied Pablo's hands and went inside. I waited until the door closed, then turned quickly to Pablo. Is Dar all right? Why have you cut your hair? To come here? He sniffed. Looks all right. I don't care how it looks. How's Dar? His face was inscrutable. Why are you here? How is he? Well enough. GOIAS is looking out for him. And Masha? Not too bad. You're sure? Your Dar is all right, Isabella. You should worry more about yourself. He began to lead the horses out into the courtyard. I went over to the crates and started to locate Miss La. What happened? The night the animals... He turned, eyes flashing. That was nothing to do with us. I know that, but do you know how... I couldn't find the words for what had happened in the bay. And anyway, I didn't want to make him angry. He hadn't had a temper when I'd known him before. No, said Pablo, but the others talked about it a lot in the Dead Arlo. They think it's something bad. I snorted. Well, obviously it's something bad. No, more than that. Not just bad. He swallowed, a muscle in his jaw working. A bad omen. It means something else has arrived to make the animals run into the sea. He sounded just like his mother. Didn't you see anything when you were out with GOIAS? It was Pablo's turn to snort. He started saddling up the horses, each movement smooth and well practiced. That was part of the problem. We couldn't see anything. The governor's men sneaked up on us in the dark, surrounding us. I nearly ran off the cliff trying to escape. He leant his head against the mane of a bay mare, so his voice became muffled. It was awful. What else happened? How did you get to the ship? Wasn't it guarded? He looked up sharply. It wasn't my idea. The fire drew the botch to the bay, and when we were running towards the house, I almost believed we could do it. Do what? Get the governor. Get him? Look, are you going to help? He began lifting the crates and strapping them to the horses. I tried to lift one. He took it from my arms with one hand like a toy. What would you have done if you'd got him? The governor? I don't know. Pablo shifted uneasily. Everyone was so angry, so fired up. I think they would have killed him. But that wouldn't have helped anything. Cata would still be dead. No more than she is already. Lupe's gone after her, I said. Pablo nodded. The guard explained. I don't understand why you're coming with us. It's my fault. The argument you had? Yes, I frowned. Do you think we're going to kill the person who killed Cata if we find him? Yes. I flinched at his certainty. This isn't going to be fun, Isabella. Some of the men who saw Cata's body Reckon it was more than one person. I wasn't sure I wanted to hear this, but I didn't want to seem scared. What do you mean? They think it was a group who killed her. Sounds to me like it was an animal. It was... He hesitated. What? Messy. I willed myself not to blink. All right, he shrugged. Your da would never forgive you if he knew what you were doing, though. I know. I should tell them. He nodded towards the door. I put on my fiercest face. You won't. I could. You'd go in your ma's place, wouldn't you? It's not the same thing. It is the same. Same as you taking her place in the fields. He paused a moment. Yeah, but I'm a man. You're a boy. And so what? Girls can go on adventures too. Have you ever heard of a girl going on an adventure? I flushed in the darkness. I had only heard of one. Arinta. She wasn't a very good heroine though, was she? They ate her, Pablo said. What? The fire dogs. They eat her at the end. No, she stays down there to protect us. Yeah, that's working out well, said Pablo. And anyway, it's a story. In a story, you can decide what happens at the end. We stared at each other in annoyed silence until he blinked and continued lifting and strapping crates. Suddenly he gasped and sucked one of his fingers. It was bleeding. Ouch! This chicken pecked me! Miss La! I peered through the slats of the box. A misty eye stared back. I laughed in relief. Can we strap this one to my horse? Which horse will that be? The smallest one, I suppose? Pablo rolled his eyes. You and that chicken. I opened the top of the box a little and put in some of the horse's feed. An irritating grin played on the corners of Pablo's mouth. Then he asked, what do you think we're going to find across the forest? The forgotten territories. How many times had I lain awake thinking about what they might be like? More forest? The River Arentara? I know the forgotten territories are real. I just never thought I'd actually see them, said Pablo. Or that they'd have trees, a river. They always seemed made up somehow. I knew what he meant. Not much could have changed in the 3 decades since the banishment. But the way everyone talked about the foreign territories, they might as well be a different country. What am I meant to call you? Pablo said. What? What am I meant to call you in front of the others? Isabella isn't a very manly name. Gabo. Pablo's voice softened. Gabo. The kitchen door banged open. You two done? Called Ferdinand. The governor's ready. Lead the horses round the front. The governor and another 5 men were waiting there, with Signora Adori in her usual blue. As the governor kissed her goodbye, I noticed her face was blotchy. I dropped my head, hoping she was no more observant than her husband. The governor chose a white mare and assigned the others their horses. I was right about getting the smallest horse, but I was still too short to mount it, so Pablo lifted me, roughly slinging me onto the gentle bay. His hands were coarse, dry skin grating my arms. The horse responded to the lightest touch, which was lucky, as I had only ridden a few times. Miss Lars stopped squawking as we settled into a trot, and when I peeked into the box, she was asleep. We turned our backs to the sea and cut across the empty field straight towards the forest, which even in the slow brightness of dusk was clearly visible above us. My breath came in small, tight gasps. I tried to take deeper breaths as the waving, shifting smudge of the forest grew higher and more solid as we approached. The muggy night fell quickly. My back was already aching from the lilt of the horse, and my feet itched in Gabo's boots. I longed for my light, well-worn sandals left by our broken door. Pablo was riding at the back. He had not spoken at all since saddling the horses, and I did not want to risk slowing to talk to him. Marquez kept turning around in his saddle to sneer at me to keep up. We approached the banks of the Arentara, the river that spanned the island. I glanced back at Pablo through the shadows, but he scowled and looked away. I glowered too. Perhaps this was the way that boys looked at each other. We forded the river, and I realised this was the furthest I had ever been from home. I thought of Dar, still in the Didalo, and felt a pang of guilt, but shook it off. Hadn't I always wanted this? The map of Gioia lay in Dar's satchel, with its blank expanse at the centre. I was going to see what it held. Dar had never bothered with his own island, too intrigued by what lay across the sea, but I knew he regretted it. Now I could draw it so he could see it too. A shiver of excitement ran up my spine until I noticed Marquez staring. I quickly adopted Pablo's scowl again. Since the banishment, the border forest had been reinforced with high thorn bushes strung with the huge warning bells. As we got closer, I noticed some of the bushes had been trampled and the ropes connecting the giant bells had been severed. They lay on the ground like metal hillocks. "The bushes, they're trampled in this direction," said Marquez. "I think Georgia was right about the killers being the banished." Governor Adori nodded. "We go through here." But no one moved. I looked at the path. It looked like a herd of animals had passed through. Dar had described claw marks around Kata's body. Perhaps this was another attempt to disguise footprints. A chill ran through us, like a gusting breeze, as if we had all realised for the first time why we were here, in the gathering darkness, about to cross into a part of Gioia that had been forgotten for a generation. It was unknown, unmapped, and home to a murderer. Dar's flat blade with its sharp teeth weighted the satchel. I wondered if I would have the courage to use it. I couldn't even throw stones at the ravens. Then I thought again of Kata and Lupe. If Lupe could go to the Forgotten Territories, I could too. Gesturing for the men with torches to go ahead, Governor Adori glanced back at us all with those slatted black eyes, then turned and rode into the forest.